more than half of all ballots cast during the last presidential election in 2016. But that hasn't slowed the candidates who are still vying for the support of America's few remaining undecided voters. Neil O'Reilly reports.
President Donald Trump, in the final days of the 2020 campaign against Joe Biden, is maintaining a whirlwind schedule aimed at focusing on anything but the coronavirus. Speaking in Goodyear, Arizona, Trump slammed Biden as the worst candidate ever to run for president.
If you vote for Biden, it means no kids in school, no graduations, no weddings, no Thanksgiving, no Christmas, and no 4th of July together. Other than that, you have a wonderful life. We have some historians here, true American historians here. He is the worst candidate ever to run in the history of a presidential election. He is.
His Democrat rival, after casting his ballot with his wife Jill, insisted he will tackle coronavirus from day one if elected, but warned there's no magic switch to end the pandemic.
Even if I win, it's going to take a lot of hard work to end this pandemic. I'm not running on the false promise of being able to end this pandemic by flipping a switch. But what I can promise you is this. We will start on day one doing the right things. We'll let science drive our decisions. We will deal honestly with the American people. And we'll never, ever, ever quit.
Early voting has now topped 70 million. The record-breaking pace could lead to the highest turnout in more than a century. Democrats hold a significant advantage in early voting due to their embrace of postal balloting, but Republicans are expected to make up ground by Election Day. Neil O'Reilly, Euronews.
Stefan Andreasen is a reader in comparative politics at Queen's University Belfast. He says the surge in early voting means candidates are limited in how much they can sway the polls this late in the campaign.
It will mitigate any very late surprises in the race. We've talked about this election as being unprecedented in many ways, and as you have described here in the beginning, having more than 1/3 of all registered voters casting votes already this year. Over 75 million votes being cast, that exceeding now well over 50% of all votes being cast in the 2016 presidential election, means that inevitably it'll be harder to shift the overall result in the days that remain up until and counting voting day.
President Trump has repeatedly been very vocal in his criticism of mail-in voting. How much more susceptible actually is it to fraud? And do you think it's likely that when the results start to come in, we might see accusations again like that coming from the president?
Okay, so I think the range of studies that have been done and the data that's out there suggests that the risk of fraud in the mail-in voting system in the United States is quite low. I don't think there's any data out there that suggests that this could really tip an election in one direction or the other. That said, and as you've noticed, President Trump has been quite clear that he doesn't like this system of large volume mail-in voting. He's made use of mail-in voting in the past himself, but in different circumstances, arguably. But I think absolutely that if the election looks like it's going against the sitting president, he has already primed the political environment, if you will, to argue that there may be fraud involved here, and that might make the situation quite difficult and quite tricky to disentangle in the hours and days after the election.